Hi, my name is Natalie Carter, and I am 24 years old. On my graduation day, my parents didn't give me flowers, a gift, or even a hug. Instead, they handed me a lottery ticket as if it were some cheap joke. But fate can be cruelly ironic because that ticket turned out to be worth $1 million. I hadn't even had the chance to celebrate when everything shifted. The moment they found out, instead of hugging me or saying congratulations, my parents and my sister Sophia surrounded me, insisting I had to give half the money to Sophia to save her failing art gallery. They didn't see it as my lucky break. To them, I was just a walking wallet. I refused. They yelled, "If you won't hand over the money, then pack your things and get out." I quietly gathered my belongings, walked away, and they thought they had won. But they had no idea that same money would become the foundation for a career that, years later, when they had lost everything, would force them to come knocking at my door. And by then, I was no longer the overlooked daughter. I was someone they no longer had the power to control. Before I continue my story, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. And let me ask you, have you ever had to fight for your worth against your own family? I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, in a small house on the edge of the suburbs. That house had 2 bedrooms for the children, but the way my parents divided the space drew a clear line between the favorite and the leftover. My sister Sophia had the bigger room, almost double the size, with a wide window overlooking the backyard, painted a soft shade of pink, furnished with shelves and a study desk carefully picked out by my parents. When I was finally old enough to have my own corner, they put me in the small room facing the street so narrow that whenever a truck roared by, the whole room shook, and the noise swallowed my sleep. My parents' explanation was simple. Sophia needs space to create her art. You only need somewhere to sleep. I didn't argue. Even as a child, I understood my place in the family was temporary, always expected to give way to the one they considered more special. Sophia's closet was always packed with new dresses, stylish shoes, and endless shopping trips with Mom that lasted for hours in the Galleria Mall. For me, shopping usually ended in 10 minutes. Mom would grab the first shirt she saw and say, "This one looks fine, Emily. Take it so we can get going." The fabric was often stiff, the colors unflattering, sometimes too loose or too tight, but I never had the right to choose. I still remember the day I complained that a shirt was too tight. My mother looked at me coldly and said, "Then lose some weight. You complain no matter what we buy." That sentence followed me through my entire childhood, making me feel like a burden, never like a child who was loved. Family photos were perhaps the clearest proof of their favoritism. In every picture framed along the hallway, Sophia stood in the center, the light catching her radiant face while my parents wrapped their arms around her, as though she were the only one who mattered. I was usually pushed to the edge, sometimes even cropped halfway out when the photos were enlarged and hung on the wall. One year, my mother even hired a professional photographer to take an entire portrait series for Sophia when she was applying to art school, while my picture remained a rushed snapshot taken at school flat gray background. Forced smile. Nothing more. I never knew what it felt like to be cherished in those photos, because in every frame, I was nothing more than an afterthought. The holidays, especially Christmas, only deepened the divide. On Christmas morning, Sophia would unwrap boxes filled with the newest iPad, an electric piano, or imported Italian paints. I sat nearby opening notebooks, clearance rack clothes that sagged off my shoulders, or sweaters 2 sizes too big. I once asked innocently, "Why does Santa like Sophia more than me?" My mother's voice was gentle but sharp underneath. "You should be grateful for what you have, Emily. Not everyone is blessed with artistic talent like Sophia. She needs investment. You only need enough to get by." At the time, I was too young to understand, but slowly, I realized my parents never saw me as a child to nurture. I was only the shadow they used to highlight Sophia's brilliance. I remember the day Sophia casually said she wanted to try violin. Within a week, my parents bought her a brand new instrument and hired a private teacher. I, on the other hand, only asked for a Lego robotics set, about $100, so I could join the science club at school. They shut me down instantly, saying it was too expensive and unnecessary. My mother added, "Stop being demanding, Emily. Focus on practical things. Creativity is Sophia's territory." Each time she said that, something inside me sank. It was clear that my dreams, my passions, didn't even measure up to one fleeting whim of Sophia's. I once tried to find comfort in my father, but his response was just as cold. One evening, I showed him a math test where I had earned a perfect score. He glanced at it briefly and said, "Good, now you can help Sophia with her homework." No praise, no encouragement. Yet when Sophia brought home a C+ in math, my mother proudly taped it to the refrigerator as if it were a trophy, and even called my grandmother, saying, "She has real potential in math." I stood there clutching my perfect test, feeling like my accomplishments would never be enough for my parents to truly see me. All of these moments carved a quiet wound inside me, the constant sense that I was an outsider in my own family. I lived in that house in Houston but never felt like I belonged. Sophia was their pride, the centerpiece of every meal, every conversation. I was only mentioned when they needed someone who would be sensible, not demand too much, or serve as a silent witness to my sister's success. Even birthdays made the divide clear. Sophia's parties had 3-tier cakes, balloons, and a house full of friends. My birthdays were reduced to a small store-bought cake, sometimes without candles. My mother would brush it off, saying, "You don't need much, Emily. Simple is fine." But that simplicity cut deep. It left a mark I couldn't shake. Maybe it was because of those memories that I learned early how to stand on my own 2 feet. I understood that if I didn't take care of myself, no one in my family ever would. I still remember the first time I truly found joy for myself: robotics and coding. By the time I was 12 or 13, I was fascinated by Lego kits, with tiny motors, and the simple lines of code that could make a robot move. I would spend hours in my small bedroom, tinkering, building, and learning the basics of programming from random tutorials I found online. When I entered high school, I knew clearly that robotics and science were the paths I wanted to pursue. I spent nearly all my free time in the school's small lab, surrounded by worn-out programming kits and robots passed down from class after class of students. I loved how a few lines of code could bring an entire machine to life, how an idea in my mind could transform into something real before my eyes. It was the rare joy I discovered in the middle of a childhood defined by comparison and favoritism. In 11th grade, my school's robotics team was selected to compete in the state championship held in Dallas. It was the first time I had ever stood inside a massive stadium, surrounded by thousands of students who shared the same passion for technology. My teammates and I had worked tirelessly for months designing circuits, writing code, and testing every tiny movement of our robot. The final result was a machine that could automatically pick up and sort balls into the correct bins within seconds. When the judges announced that our team had won 2nd place in the entire state, I was so overwhelmed with joy I nearly cried. That moment felt as precious to me as any prestigious diploma, but that joy quickly dissolved when I looked up into the stands. Not a single member of my family was there. My parents didn't come, and of course, neither did Sophia. After receiving the award, I called home, my voice still trembling with excitement, only to hear my mother respond flatly, "Uh-huh. That's good. Oh, by the way, Sophia had an art exhibition at school today. A lot of people praised her work. You should congratulate her." I froze. So that was the reason they weren't there for me on one of the most important days of my life, because of a small high school art show where Sophia had hung a few simple sketches in a hallway. In my parents' eyes, that exhibition outweighed the achievement I had poured every ounce of my energy into. That night, when I came home, the living room lights were glowing. The dining table was set with fruit, pastries, and wine. For a brief moment, I thought maybe they had planned a surprise celebration for me. But the moment I stepped inside, the truth hit me. The entire party was for Sophia to congratulate her on her unexpectedly successful art exhibition. Sophia's friends, neighbors, and relatives were all there, raising their glasses to praise her natural artistic talent. I sat quietly in the corner, my silver medal still hanging around my neck, but no one even bothered to glance at it. When I tried to hand it to my father, he barely glanced at it before setting it down on the table, turning back immediately to continue discussing one of Sophia's landscape paintings. I don't remember what I ate that night. What I do remember is the icy feeling running down my spine. That house, which had never truly felt warm to me, suddenly felt like a grand theater with only one star Sophia while I was the forgotten audience. Later that night, I unclasped the medal and tucked it away in my desk drawer, never to bring it out again. Because I already knew, in that space, it would never be recognized. High school went on like that, year after year, where my achievements were brushed aside while Sophia's smallest steps were inflated into victories. When Sophia won a consolation prize in a county art competition, My parents threw a backyard barbecue and invited friends over to celebrate. When I earned an A+ in an advanced math exam, my mother simply reminded me, "Make sure to tutor Sophia, she struggles in that subject." Even when I was selected for the school's honor society, my parents didn't bother to show up at the induction ceremony, yet they never once missed any of Sophia's art events, no matter how small. That was when I began to see the pattern clearly. In my family, there was only room for one star. And that star was never going to be me. The final years of high school passed quickly, and then the most important moment arrived: applying to college. While my friends chatted excitedly about their dream schools, I quietly chose the path I knew fit me best: software engineering at the University of Texas at Austin, one of the most respected technology programs in the state. I wanted to study somewhere that would challenge me, somewhere I could turn my passion for robotics and coding into a real career. For me, it wasn't just about chasing a dream, it was about finally stepping out of Sophia's shadow and leaving behind the years of being dismissed and overlooked. Sophia's path was very different. She applied to a long list of prestigious art schools, from New York to California, but the results were nothing but rejection letters or spots on the waiting list. I still remember the day she received her final rejection. She burst into tears, and my mother held her close, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll find a place that's a better fit for you. What matters is that you get to do what you love." And sure enough, just a few weeks later, they found a small private school in Dallas. The tuition was sky high, but it accepted Sophia without demanding much in terms of qualifications. Without hesitation, my parents agreed they would cover the entire tuition, pay for an apartment near the school, and even give Sophia a monthly allowance so she could focus entirely on pursuing her art. Meanwhile, I quietly received my acceptance letter from the University of Texas at Austin, along with a partial scholarship based on my academic record. Excited and nervous, I handed the letter to my parents, hoping that at least this time they might show a little pride. But all I got was a curt response from my father: "If you're good at technology, then take care of yourself. Sophia needs more." Hearing those words felt like a bucket of cold water thrown in my face. It didn't matter that I had proven myself through real accomplishments. It still wasn't enough for them to invest in me. So that fall, Sophia moved into her bright new apartment in Dallas, with my parents by her side helping her clean, decorate, and shop for everything from a bed to a desk to a brand new easel. And me? I boarded a bus to Austin alone, carrying a few old bags of clothes and the little savings I had scraped together from part-time jobs. I was assigned a cramped dorm room that I shared with 2 other students. But honestly, I didn't mind. I was used to it, used to giving things up, used to figuring things out on my own. From the very first year of college, the weight of finances pressed down on me. My scholarship covered only part of the tuition, and I had to work to make up the rest. I took a job at the campus library, shelving books, checking student IDs, and sometimes working overnight shifts just to hold my place there. In the evenings, after leaving the library, I ran to a cafe near campus to wait tables. There were days when I worked 12 hours straight, coming back to my dorm with barely enough energy to shove down some instant noodles before collapsing at my desk, still in my coffee-stained uniform. Every time I opened my phone and saw Sophia's posts, her small exhibitions, paintings displayed in her private studio, fancy dinners my parents took her to, I felt a bitter knot tighten in my chest. I knew my parents were still sending her money regularly, caring for every small detail of her life. For me, aside from the occasional call asking, "Are your studies going okay?" there was nothing else. Sometimes they even scolded me. "Emily, you should be more independent. Don't bother us with money matters." And I wondered if I never bothered them, would I even exist in their eyes at all? I remember one moment vividly, near the end of my freshman year. I called home to share that I had been selected as a teaching assistant for one of my professors, a rare opportunity, especially for a first-year student. I thought maybe this time they would be proud, maybe even congratulate me, but my mother only said, "Oh, Sophia just sold her first painting. We're planning a little party to celebrate her." I swallowed hard, forcing my happiness back down, and gave a weak smile over the phone. "Tell her I'm happy for her." Oh, that's how my college years went quiet, filled with one job after another. I didn't have time to go out much, no money for fancy dinners like my friends, and I never received care packages from home the way Sophia did. But I learned patience. I learned to value every dollar I earned. Most importantly, I learned to build my worth on something other than my parents' recognition. Slowly, I began to believe that maybe their neglect was the very fire pushing me forward. Every time I stepped into the lab and watched my robot follow commands perfectly, a quiet warmth filled my chest. I realized that no matter how much I was overlooked, I still had the ability to carve my own path. I didn't need my parents' favoritism. I didn't need anyone to hand me opportunities. I would create them myself. But deep down, I still longed for one small thing just once, to have my parents look me in the eye and say, "We're proud of you." That moment never came. The day I had been working toward for 4 years finally arrived. After countless sleepless nights, endless exhausting shifts at the cafe and the library, I walked across the stage to receive my software engineering degree with a 3.8 GPA, a feat my professors openly admired, knowing how difficult it was for a student who had to work while studying. When the announcer called my name, I stood, my legs trembling with emotion. The applause of my classmates and professors echoed around me, and for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that all my efforts had been worth it. I looked out into the audience, hoping to see my parents beaming, waving proudly at me. Instead, my eyes caught their indifference. My mother was glued to her phone, my father whispering something to Sophia. Moments later, they got up and left before the ceremony was even over. Even the most sacred moment of my life wasn't enough to make them stay. That evening, my parents said they would throw a small party to celebrate me. I already knew what that meant: a few takeout dishes, cheap wine, and an atmosphere as flat as a casual get-together. I couldn't help but wonder, was this really all they thought I deserved after years of sacrifice? As soon as I placed my diploma on the table, my mother turned immediately to Sophia, launching into an enthusiastic discussion about opening a new art gallery for her in downtown Dallas. I sat there, my chest tight, realizing that to them, the most important part of the day wasn't that I had graduated, but that Sophia had yet another new opportunity to shine. I tried to keep calm, but when it came time for gifts, I could hardly believe my eyes. My father handed me an envelope. I opened it, and inside was a lottery ticket. My mother let out a mocking laugh. On the way here, we stopped at a gas station and saw them selling these. "Who knows, Emily? Maybe you'll get lucky and change your life." I froze, feeling as if I'd just been slapped. A gift they hadn't prepared in advance, just something they grabbed thoughtlessly on the way. A gift meant to mock me, to remind me that in their eyes, all my years of effort weren't worth anything more than a slip of paper and a chance of luck. Meanwhile, at that very same party, my parents proudly announced that they would be giving Sophia $150,000 to open her art gallery in downtown Dallas, a staggering sum I wouldn't have even dared to dream of back when I was struggling through college. Sophia beamed, hugging our parents tightly, while everyone around clapped and cheered. I sat there, holding back tears, asking myself what I had done to deserve such blatant unfairness. I had earned a 3.8 GPA, I had a clear career path ahead, and yet Sophia, who had only sold a handful of small paintings to her friends, was the one hailed as the future of the family. I leaned back in my chair, swallowing a bitter sigh. In my head, a cold truth echoed. They would never change. They would never see my true worth. At first, I thought about throwing the lottery ticket away. I didn't believe in luck, and I certainly didn't want to keep a gift that felt like pure humiliation. But in a moment of weakness, I slipped it into my wallet, deciding it would serve as a bitter reminder of the day my parents diminished me, even as I stood on the stage of triumph. I never imagined that very ticket would become the turning point of my entire life. I still remember that night like a strange dream. After the dull graduation party, I went back to my room. I pulled the ticket from my wallet, planning to check the numbers just once before tossing it in the trash, so I wouldn't be haunted by the memory of such a cruel gift. But the longer I stared at those faint numbers printed across the paper, the stronger my curiosity grew. I picked up my phone, opened the Texas Lottery website, and typed in the sequence. For a moment, my heart stopped. The first number matched. Then the second. I kept checking until the very last one, and every single number lined up. I collapsed onto my bed, my heart pounding wildly. I couldn't believe my eyes. For the first time in my life, I had actually won, but not the recognition from my parents I had always longed for. Instead, it was a stroke of luck handed to me by fate. I checked the numbers over and over again, at least 10 times, then even used the lottery app on my phone just to be certain. There was no doubt about it, I had won the jackpot, $1 million. At first, My emotions were a whirlwind. I laughed, then I cried. I laughed at the irony my parents had handed me that ticket as a joke, a way to diminish my achievement, yet it was the very thing that opened a brand new door for me. And I cried from the bitterness because maybe fate itself was fairer than my own parents had ever been. I sat there in the dark, clutching the ticket tightly, as if it were the only proof I had that I, too, deserved a brilliant future. But the joy quickly gave way to fear. I knew my parents all too well. If they ever found out, they wouldn't stop until every cent ended up in Sophia's hands. In their eyes, I had never been the one who needed help. Everything I earned was dismissed with the same excuse. You're capable, you can handle it. Meanwhile, no matter how many times Sophia failed, she was rescued, funded, and encouraged to keep dreaming. And I knew, without a doubt, that the $1 million would become the capital Sophia needed for a fresh start, if I wasn't careful. The very next day, I made a decision I wouldn't tell my family. Instead, I went to a highly recommended financial law office in Houston. Sitting across from the lawyer, my hands trembled as I placed the ticket on the table. He glanced at it, then gave me a small, knowing smile. Congratulations, Emily. This is the beginning of a turning point in your life. But beginnings are always the hardest. The most important thing now is protecting this money. We went over everything in detail. He explained the federal and state taxes, the choice between a lump sum or annual payments. I chose the lump sum $1 million before taxes, which came to about $700,000 after deductions. He walked me through opening a separate account, completely independent from anything tied to my family, and he emphasized, don't rush to tell anyone, especially your family. Not because you don't trust them, but because experience shows that money can turn even the closest relatives into strangers. I nodded, my chest heavy, because deep down I already knew that was true long before this money ever came into my life. I went to the lottery office to complete the paperwork, posing with the oversized check as part of the ritual. I smiled for the camera, but inside, all I felt was dread. I couldn't stop wondering how my parents would react when they saw my face on the local news. I could picture it clearly, their expressions, not glowing with pride, but lighting up at the scent of money. After collecting the prize, I spent several sessions with a financial advisor, planning for the future. He helped me map it out, put a portion into safe investments like bonds, set aside some to buy a home, and keep a share for starting a business. For the first time, I could faintly imagine a new life, a life without 12-hour shifts, without instant noodles for dinner, without the constant fear every time a bill came due. For the first time ever, I saw a path laid out in front of me, a path I had built for myself, not one dictated by my parents, not one shadowed by Sophia. And yet, joy was tangled with worry. I remembered my parents' words. Family means sharing, Emily. You can't just think about yourself. For years, that phrase had been used to force me into sacrifice, to push me into giving up opportunities for Sophia. I knew without a doubt they would say the same thing when they found out about the lottery. They would insist, Sophia needs money to keep her gallery running. You have your degree now, you'll have a career, just give her a portion. And this time, I knew I would have to face them directly. There would be no avoiding it. Those nights, I could hardly sleep. I tossed and turned, caught between excitement and unease. I thought about the future, about the little apartment I could finally buy, about the steady job waiting for me as a software engineer, and most of all, about the day I might open a company of my own. But then I also thought about my parents' eyes, the way their voices softened only when they said Sophia's name, the way they had dismissed every effort I ever made. Would I be strong enough to hold on to this money, to hold on to this chance to change my life? I knew it was only a matter of time before my parents found out. News of someone in Houston winning $1 million jackpot couldn't stay hidden for long, especially not with my photo, holding that oversized check, printed on the local news site. I tried to pretend nothing had happened, to keep quiet for a few more days, clinging to the fragile calm inside a house that had never truly felt warm. One late afternoon, I came home from my library shift and immediately felt the change in the air. Stepping into the living room, I froze. My parents and Sophia were all sitting there, as if they had been waiting for me. On the coffee table lay the photo of me with the giant check, neatly printed and placed like evidence in a family trial. The tension was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I set my bag down and sat across from them, trying to steady my breathing. I knew this was at the beginning of the confrontation I could no longer avoid. You kept this from us very well, my father began, his tone laced not with pride but with accusation. I pressed my lips together, silent. My mother wasted no time circling the point. Emily, we need to have a serious talk. You're an adult now, and you should understand how important family is. Sophia is struggling with her gallery. You need to give her half that money, at least $500,000. That's the only way to secure the future of this family. I was stunned. I had prepared myself for the demand, but hearing it out loud still pierced me like a knife. Mom, Dad, you're not even going to congratulate me? My voice trembled. I just graduated with a 3.8 GPA. I just won the lottery, and all you can think about is how Sophia can get more money. My mother's brows knitted together. Don't be selfish. You already have a degree. You already have a stable career ahead of you. What more do you need? And besides, that ticket was bought by us, not by you. Something inside me snapped. Years of being dismissed, overlooked, cast aside, all of it came rushing up like a flood that could no longer be contained. I laughed bitterly, no longer willing to sit in silence. Stable? Do you have any idea that I had to work 12-hour days just to pay for tuition? Do you know I never received a single cent of support while Sophia was coddled in every possible way? When I won second place at the state robotics competition, who was there cheering for me? No one. But when Sophia hung a few drawings in a school hallway, you threw her a party as if she'd just held an exhibition in New York. Where was the fairness in that? Sophia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her tone dripping with disdain. You always loved to play the victim. Mom and Dad treated us both fairly. You're just too sensitive. I turned to her, a cold smile on my face. Fairly? When you needed the bigger room, I was shoved into the tiny one by the noisy street. When you got new dresses, I wore clearance rack clothes. When you wanted summer art classes, they sent you all the way to New York. And when I asked for a tech camp, I got one answer: too expensive. If that's your definition of fairness, then I must be living in a different world. My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. Enough. Don't you dare be disrespectful. You're sitting on $1 million. All we're asking is for you to share half, and everything will be fine. Family means sacrifice for each other. I looked straight into his eyes and said each word carefully. Sacrifice for each other? For 24 years, I've sacrificed more than enough. I learned to feed myself, to pay my own tuition, to stand on my own without a single bit of help from you. Meanwhile, Sophia has been lifted up no matter how many times she failed. And now, when I finally have a chance to change my life, you want to take that away too. Well, I'm sorry, this time I will not sacrifice. The air in the room grew thick, every word I spoke cutting into them like a blade. My mother trembled with rage, my father's face turned red, and Sophia let out a sharp laugh. You really think you can do anything with that money? You'll waste it sooner or later. Better to hand it to someone who actually knows how to use it. My father shot to his feet, pointing at the door. If you won't hand over the money, then get out. We don't need a selfish person in this house. Oh, I drew in a long breath, suddenly realizing there was no reason left to argue. If that's all you think of me, then I have no reason to stay in this house anymore. In that moment, an unexpected lightness filled me. For years, I had waited for recognition, for the words, "We're proud of you." But now I understood it was never going to come. I picked up my bag and lifted my head high. Then I'll go. Now. I walked out the door as my parents' and Sophia's voices echoed behind me, still filled with accusations and blame. But I didn't look back. Each step felt like breaking free from chains that had bound me my entire life. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but I knew one thing. From this moment on, I was no longer the overlooked shadow they had always dismissed. I had chosen my own path, and I would protect it with everything I had. I left that house in Houston on a sweltering evening, carrying nothing but a suitcase with a few clothes and the battered laptop that had gotten me through 4 years of college. My phone buzzed nonstop in my bag, messages from my mother flashing across the screen. Don't be stubborn. Think this through. Family is the most important thing. Sophia needs you. I didn't respond to a single one. On the bus heading toward Dallas, I leaned my head against the window and watched the city lights fade into the distance. A hollow ache sat heavy in my chest, but beneath it was something else: relief. For all those years, I had been chained to that house, to endless comparisons, to unreasonable demands for sacrifice. But this time, I had finally cut the cord. It only took a day for me to find a small apartment on the outskirts of Dallas, not far from downtown, barely 400 square feet, with plain white walls, but to me it felt like my own kingdom. For the first time in my life, I had the freedom to arrange a space entirely my way. I bought an old wooden desk from a secondhand shop, set my laptop on it, and called it my office. On the wall, I taped sheets of paper divided into columns, one for safe investments, one for startup projects, and one for personal dreams. The lottery money, after taxes, wasn't enough to let me relax for life, but it was enough to launch a new beginning, one where I no longer had to tremble every time I opened a bill. In those early days, I went to the bank, opened a private account, and worked with my lawyer to set up a trust to protect my assets. I spent hours reading investment documents, researching small tech startups in Dallas, and jotting down every idea that came to me. I felt a rush of excitement, as if after years of living in shadows, I had finally stepped into the light. But beneath that joy lingered a constant worry. My parents and Sophia would not give up so easily. And just as I feared, a few days later I had to return to the old house to collect important documents I had accidentally left behind: my birth certificate, tax records, and a few certificates I would need for my future work. I went early in the morning, thinking they'd still be asleep. But when I opened the door, the sight that greeted me left me frozen. The living room was littered with shredded paper. On the coffee table lay what was left of the oversized lottery check I'd been given for the photo at the lottery office, the ceremonial prop, now torn into jagged scraps, as though someone had ripped it apart in a fit of rage. Sophia sat cross-legged on the sofa, her eyes gleaming with triumph. My mother looked at me with a satisfied smirk, while my father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he had just carried out an act of justice. "You came just in time," my mother said, her voice sweet but dripping with mockery. "We just solved the problem. No check means no way for you to keep that money all to yourself." Sophia lifted a scrap of paper, half my name still visible on it, and let out a sharp laugh. "Looks like you're empty-handed now, Emily. You'd better do what they say." I froze for a moment, then suddenly burst out laughing. At first it was a quiet chuckle, but it quickly grew into loud, rolling laughter that filled the entire room. My parents and Sophia stared at me like I had lost my mind. "What's so funny?" my father barked. Wiping tears from my eyes, I kept laughing. "Oh my God, do you honestly think that check was real money? You thought tearing it up would destroy $1 million? That was just a prop for the photo. The money was deposited into my account that very same day." The room went silent, frozen. The smile slipped off Sophia's face. My mother's expression went pale, and my father just stared blankly at the scraps of paper on the floor. I walked over to the table, picked up one of the torn pieces, held it up in front of them, and said coldly, "You've just made fools of yourselves. Never has it been so clear to you. I've never been a daughter, only a walking wallet. And when you couldn't squeeze money out of me, you chose to destroy, hoping to drag me down with you. But I'm sorry I won't fall that easily. Emily, we didn't know, my mother stammered. I cut her off, my voice sharp as a blade. Didn't know? Didn't know that I've grown up? That I'm smart enough to protect myself? Or didn't know that you've just proved me right, that I've never truly had a family in this house?" Sophia sat in silence, biting her lip, her eyes still burning with hostility. My father tried to summon his old authority, his voice heavy with force. "Say whatever you want, we're still family. You can't just cut us off like this." I looked at him, memories flashing every time I was left behind, every accomplishment dismissed, every party thrown only for Sophia. I drew in a deep breath and spoke slowly, firmly. "Family? Family isn't a place where one child is treated like they don't exist. Family isn't a place where one is always forced to sacrifice for another. If that's your definition of family, then I'd rather have none at all." 1. I gathered the documents I needed, and stuffed them quickly into my bag before heading straight for the door. Behind me, I heard my mother's desperate voice cry out, "Emily, don't go, we can talk about this." But I didn't stop, I didn't turn back. Inside me, it felt like a door had just closed forever. I knew then that I had severed the last thread tying me to them. Stepping out of that house, I drew in a long breath, and the Dallas sky felt wider than it ever had before. I knew there would still be struggles, still obstacles waiting ahead, but I also knew that, for the first time in my life, I was truly free. From that moment on, I was no longer the daughter dismissed by her parents, no longer the shadow trailing behind Sophia. I was Emily Carter, the only one holding the key to my own future. After leaving that house filled with scraps of torn paper and bitter stares, I returned to my little apartment in Dallas with the mindset of someone who had just broken free from chains. I sat for hours at my old wooden desk, staring at the notes I had taped to the wall. On one side was safety savings, bonds, a cushion for risk. On the other side was dreams, launching my own software company, turning all those years tinkering with robotics and coding into a real career path. I knew $1 million wasn't enough to last a lifetime, but it was enough to begin. And if there was one thing my childhood of neglect had taught me, it was this: opportunities don't come twice, and when they appear, you have to grab them with both hands. The first person I thought of was Maria Lopez, my closest friend from college. Maria was the daughter of a Mexican immigrant family. She studied the same major I did, but unlike me, she carried a light, positive energy that lifted everyone around her. We had pulled all-nighters together for projects, shared sandwiches in the library, and once dreamed about running a small software company of our own. I picked up the phone, my voice a mix of nerves and excitement. "Maria, do you remember our dream? It's time to make it real." We met in Houston, at a little cafe near our old university. I told Maria everything about winning the lottery, about wanting to invest in the future, and her eyes lit up. "Emily, I've been waiting for this day. I'll handle operations, you handle the tech. We can do this." We shook hands, no contracts, no oaths, just a shared belief that we were ready. With $200,000, Maria and I mapped out every detail. Part of it went toward renting a modest office in downtown Houston, not fancy, just enough space for 4 desks, a few swivel chairs, and one big whiteboard. Another part went to equipment: servers, high-performance computers, licensed software. The rest was set aside for 1 year of salaries for our first 3 hires, fresh graduates full of energy, willing to work hard for a modest but fair wage. The day we hung the sign Apex Solutions above the office door, I stepped back and stared at the letters trembling under the Texas sun. Pride welled up in me like I had never felt before. This wasn't just a software company. It was proof that I had broken free of the shadow my parents and Sophia had cast over me. It was a declaration that I could build something of my own. At first, clients were scarce. We went door to door at small and mid-sized businesses around Houston, pitching our services: inventory management systems, process optimization tools, customized e-commerce platforms. Many turned us away, skeptical of a team of young graduates, but a few small business owners saw the potential. Our very first client was a local appliance retailer. Their outdated inventory system constantly caused errors, costing them thousands every month. We built them a real-time inventory management program, integrated directly onto tablets, cutting their losses by more than 30% in just 3 months. When they handed us a check for $15,000, I held it with trembling hands. For the first time in my life, I was earning money not from grueling part-time shifts, but from my own mind and passion. Slowly, word began to spread. A small coffee shop chain hired us to build an online ordering system. A transportation company contracted us to develop a vehicle tracking platform. Each completed project was another step forward, and every bit of positive feedback from clients felt like fuel to keep going. Maria handled project management, scheduling, and client relations, while I oversaw the technical architecture and worked side by side with our 3 programmers, coding late into the night. We lived on cold pizza and instant coffee, often pushing through until midnight, but none of us felt tired because for the first time, we were building a future that was truly ours. I used a small portion of the remaining lottery money to stabilize my personal life. I rented a slightly larger apartment in Houston and bought a used but reliable car to get around. Most of the money, though, I put into safe investments, just as my lawyer had advised. I didn't want to become another cautionary tale of someone who hit the jackpot only to go bankrupt a few years later. I wanted to prove that I was different, that I could turn luck into a solid foundation. Whenever I thought of my parents and Sophia, a complicated wave of emotion rose inside me. To them, I had always been a shadow, an afterthought. Yet here I was, running a small but growing company, creating jobs for others, slowly carving my name into the tech landscape of Texas. I didn't need their recognition anymore. The acknowledgement from myself, from Maria, from our satisfied clients, that was enough. By the end of our first year, we totaled over $200,000 in revenue, The little office buzzed with laughter as we celebrated, and I sat quietly for a moment, staring at the numbers on the whiteboard. From a lottery ticket they had dismissed as a joke, from a daughter my parents had cast aside, I had turned opportunity into reality. I knew this was only the beginning. But it was the beginning I had been waiting for my entire life. 18 months after Maria and I first hung the sign, Apex Solutions, above our tiny Houston office, everything had changed. The sleepless nights spent coding, the long days driving around the city pitching to clients finally, it all bore fruit. Our first year had closed at just over $200,000 in revenue, and by the middle of the second year, we had surpassed the $1 million mark. It wasn't just a number on paper. It was validation from the market, proof that I was on the right path, that my hard work had never been in vain. One June morning, I received a call from a reporter at the Houston Business Journal. He said they wanted to feature me in their Rising Young Entrepreneurs column. For a moment, I sat in silence, feeling like I was dreaming. I thought back to all the times my parents had called Sophia the pride of the family, simply because she had a tiny art gallery, and now, it was my name appearing in print, under the headline, "From Nothing to $1 Million in Revenue, The Journey of Apex Solutions and Its Young Female Founder." When the article went live, new clients began reaching out, and I received invitations to collaborate with larger companies. I rewarded myself with a milestone, buying a luxury apartment in the heart of Houston. It was on a high floor, with a wide balcony that overlooked the glittering city lights at night. I hand-picked every piece of furniture from a leather sofa to walnut bookshelves, not to show off, but to remind myself that I had climbed out of the past. Each morning, as I brewed coffee and watched the city glow beneath the rising sun, I felt it clearly. I was living a life I had once believed was only a dream. Meanwhile, on the other side of the story, my family was stepping into shadow. Sophia's gallery, the place my parents once praised endlessly, calling her born to be an artist, and a girl with impeccable taste, was growing emptier by the week. At first, they blamed the economy. Then, they blamed customers for not understanding art. But the truth was obvious to everyone. Sophia didn't know how to manage money, bought and sold on whim, and had no business strategy to sustain her. When the debts piled up, my parents were forced to mortgage the family home to keep Sophia's gallery afloat. I heard the news through a relative, and a sharp ache twisted in my chest. That house had once been called the sacred home that could never be compromised. They had even been willing to throw me out just to preserve it for Sophia. And yet in the end, they were the ones who put it on the line. Things unraveled quickly. When Sophia couldn't keep up with the bank payments, the house was foreclosed. My parents, the same people who once boasted that they never needed anyone's help, were now reduced to renting a cheap apartment on the outskirts of town. The elegant living room photos that had once decorated their walls became nothing more than memories. In the eyes of the neighbors, they had gone from a family to be admired to a cautionary tale of failure. I knew everything that was happening, but I didn't intervene. I was no longer that 18-year-old girl breaking herself just to earn their approval. I had learned to draw boundaries. Then one day, while I was at the Apex office, Maria walked in and whispered, "Emily, there are some people here to see you. They say they're your family." I looked up, and sure enough, through the glass door stood my parents and Sophia. Their clothes were plain, stripped of the pride and polish they once carried. Sophia stared at the floor, and my mother forced a strained, awkward smile. They stepped inside. The air grew so heavy that the entire office fell silent. My father was the first to speak. "Emily, I know we made mistakes in the past, but things are very difficult for the family now. Could you lend a hand? After all, we're still family." I looked at them, and there was no gloating in me, none of the triumph I once imagined. All I felt was a vast emptiness. Slowly, carefully, I replied, "Family is not a place that only knows how to take. I spent 24 years learning that lesson." No one said another word. Sophia's eyes brimmed with tears. My mother turned her face away, and my father sat in silence. They were waiting for me to extend my hand, the way I had so many times before, but this time, I wasn't going to carry their burdens. I had a life of my own now. After they left, Maria came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay, because for once, I finally said the thing I should have said a long time ago." That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the stretch of Houston lights glowing beneath me. I knew then that my family hadn't fallen apart, because I walked away they had collapsed under the weight of their own choices. As for me, the child who had once been discarded, I had become a woman with a career, a future, and, most importantly, freedom. The days that followed felt like the start of an entirely new chapter. No more sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever be good enough in my parents' eyes. No more secret tears as Sophia was celebrated while I stood in her shadow. Instead, I lived with intention, with pride, and with gratitude for myself for not giving up. When Apex Solutions crossed $3 million in revenue in our third year, I bought myself a gift, a new car. It wasn't just a luxury vehicle, it was a symbol of the long road I had traveled. I remembered the years of riding the bus for hours to get to class, clutching my old laptop and a bag of cheap snacks. Now, sitting behind the wheel of my new car, I knew every drop of sweat from those days had been worth it. But I didn't stop at celebrating. I wanted to send a message. I bought several copies of the Houston Business Journal, the issue with my face on the cover under the bold headline, "Young Tech Entrepreneur Builds Multi-Million-Dollar Company." I slipped one into an envelope, no letter, no words, just the magazine, with my confident smile staring back, and I mailed it directly to the small rented apartment where my parents and Sophia now lived. I knew the moment they opened that envelope it would cut deep into their pride. They would remember all the times they dismissed me, all the times they made me feel like I was nothing. And now the truth was undeniable. The daughter they had cast aside was the one on the cover of a business magazine, while their so-called pride had failed spectacularly. I didn't need to shout at them. See, I was right. The magazine cover did that for me. As my career grew stronger, my heart also found peace. David, the man who had stood by me since the earliest days of Apex, asked me to marry him. He didn't love me for the spotlight, nor lean on me for money. He loved me when I was just a girl obsessed with her work, still scrambling for our very first client. Our wedding was simple but warm, held in a small garden in Houston with close friends and colleagues. My parents weren't there. Sophia wasn't there. And yet, I didn't feel anything was missing. I understood then that real happiness doesn't depend on who stands beside you on your wedding day, it depends on whether you've chosen the right person to walk beside you for life. After the wedding, David and I moved into a new house not far from the office. Mornings were spent cooking breakfast together, weekends strolling through the park. That quiet, loving rhythm of life was something I had never known in my old family. And it was exactly what healed the deepest wounds inside me. Sometimes, I still think about my parents. I wonder if they ever feel regret. If they ever look at Sophia's failures and remember all the times they told me I would never be good enough. But then I realize those questions don't matter anymore. I don't need answers from them to define my worth. I've already learned how to write that definition myself. Standing on the balcony of my new home, looking out at the city lights glowing bright, I whispered to myself and to anyone listening to my story, never let anyone force you to share the fruits of your labor just because they carry the title of family. Blood does not equal love. And real love never comes with exploitation or favoritism. Perhaps the greatest lesson I've learned is this. The sweetest revenge isn't making others suffer, it's finding success and happiness, living a life of freedom, free from toxic chains. If you are in the place I once was overlooked, dismissed, having your efforts taken without recognition, I want you to know you are not alone. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to protect what is yours. You have the right to build your own home, your own family, your own life without needing permission or validation from those who once hurt you. It took me 24 years to understand that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is stop clinging to relationships that have already rotted. Save that energy for nourishing yourself, for your career, for friendships and love that are truly worthy. When you do, you'll discover a freedom you never thought possible. Today, I have a solid career, a kind partner, and a peaceful life. I no longer need my parents' recognition. I no longer need their apology. Because I have proven with my own life that they were wrong and I was right to believe in myself. My story ends here, but I hope it opens something in you. If you are standing at a crossroads, belittled by family, forced to sacrifice for others, remember, you do not owe them your entire life. The only debt you carry is to yourself, a debt to live happily, and you deserve that.